Now we're taking a bit of a different tack and moving away from web privacy and into a different area where privacy surprisingly is still relevant. The stock market. So, if your trades are really big in the stock market, you're going to move the market, and other people might guess your strategy and maybe trade against you. So, Artur is coming to us from Proof Trading, along with collaborators from CUNY and Northeastern, and this is defining and controlling information leakage in US equities trading. Along with him are Alison Bishop, Paul Cesaretti, Garrison Grogan, Adam McCoy, Robert Moss, Lisa Oakley, Marcel Ribeiro, and Mohammed Chokri. All yours.
Well, thank you very much. So I'll be presenting this research with Proof Trading. So who is Proof, right? Proof Trading is a broker-dealer that's registered to trade in US equities. And it's actually a unusual broker in the sense that they really have a strong proponent for transparency in the markets. So they do open research on their algorithms and publish this research. And this is actually facilitates them to work with academics, many of whom are involved in this work, including me. So I finished my PhD a couple of years ago, and I'm for slightly 1 year, I have been working on this work. So just to give a general idea of the introduction, and a general idea of the stock market, we can think about the stock market as a set of buyers that will give some bids. They will say how many shares they want to buy, what's the price that they want to pay, and sellers as well doing offers on their shares and how much money they are willing to sell them for that. And whenever these things match, we can have a trade. What characterizes a trade is pretty much a data stamp with date and time, the number of shares, the symbol name, and the price. So a simplified view of the market in which you can make a model to work on is a time series with all this data. Of course, this is a bit simplified. You don't have only one exchange, so you have multiple exchanges. But this gives a general idea of how to collect and process this data. And the problem that we're interested in are, for example, in asset managers. So we have Alice, that's an asset manager that works for a company that manages a large pool of assets. So we're talking about retirement funds, pension accounts, lots of assets that general people use for the savings. And usually these companies will have a portfolio of stocks. So they will have a different number of stocks, different symbols. And the problem is that as they have very, very large number of assets on these portfolios, whenever they want to make some change on it, sell some symbols and buy others, this is often a high operation. And this does not go unnoticed in the market. So the problem that we have is how Alice can buy and sell the shares. Now, when Alice goes to the stock market, she can't really just buy, for example, 100,000 shares in one go. She'll go through the sell offers. We'll go from the cheapest one to we'll start with the cheapest one, and after she buys that, she'll go to the second cheapest, third cheapest, and so on. So, of course, only through this process, if she were to buy everything at once, the price would gradually increase. But that's not the only problem. The problem that we're more interested in is about what this looks like for anyone looking in the market, right? So if we have some observer on the market, and that's what we most have on markets, they will see this kind of unusual behavior, someone buying a lot of shares from the same symbol, and say, well, they are buying this much shares, I might be able to make some money and get away with it. And this is the kind of information leakage that we're interested in avoiding. Now, I will just give an overlook on how we model the market. As I said, it's a bit of a time series. So the model that we are using here is to have some kind of distribution of trade activity. So you can look, for example, for a single symbol during a specific window of time. So let's say this INDCPA symbol for 10 minutes, from 9:30 to 9:40 a.m., and we get some number of days. So you can consider the 3 months. You can aggregate this data and come up with this, this probability distribution. Now, when Alice goes into play, if she decides to, in this 10-minute window, buy 100,000 shares, that is what's going to probably happen to that probability distribution. So the market activity that was on this first curve is going to get shifted on the second one. And an observer can just decide that whenever they see some activity that's after some certain threshold, they will act and say, well, someone is actually really interested in these shares, and trigger some kind of activity. Now, as Alice is buying a lot of shares or selling a lot of shares, it's impossible for her to go unnoticed, but what she can hope to achieve is to try to go just a little bit over what the market activity would be. So this actually prompted some differential privacy ideas to the group. So the idea is that we want the world without Alice to look as close as possible to the world with Alice. Oh, sorry. So now, how do we model this in a game model approach? We can see this as some kind of distribution on the market, as I was saying, and we have some kind of auxiliary information to Alice. This usually can be some kind of stochastic function, some post-processing of the market. It can be, we contemplate pretty much every case on that. So Alice can be completely blind, have no information at all, only the distribution, or she can actually know the realization of the random variable of the market. And then Alice will just make an action. So she'll make a number of trades, buy a number of shares or sell a number of shares. And a function of this will result in what is the market for the public, right? So it will be some kind of function of the market and Alice's action. For the paper, we are mostly interested in the additive, so we just add Alice's activity to the market activity, which is fairly natural, but just note this is a more general model, so we can actually do all sorts of combinations with that. And of course, we can just then, after this is for a period of time of 10 minutes, we can, for the next 10 minutes, we can iterate over that if we have a model of how this works. For the one shot, So now, this is a classic utility privacy trade-off. The utility here being Alice wants maximize her actions as much as possible, and the privacy goal being, well, we want, as I said, the world with Alice to look as much as possible to the world without. So ideally, we want to maximize actions and keep this difference not far apart. And it turns out, for the one round, that we were able to translate this into a linear programming approach, which was fairly nice, and implement this as well, which pretty much just maximizes the expected value for Alice's action, subject to this differential private constraints, right? So this differentially private intuition, at least, constraint. And also some structural constraints that are mostly to do with computation time and also guaranteeing everything is a probability distribution and this kind of things. And on real data, this is what the algorithm looks like. So this is real raw data. There's no processing here. Of course, it's not probably a model that a statistician would use, but just to actually make the point that if you see what this is doing, we have these privacy bounds, the upper and lower bound, and the middle distribution. In blue is the market distribution, and you can see what the algorithm is suggesting, right? The algorithm is suggesting, well, if we take an additive approach, Alice should move this curve to a little bit to the right, so it's just under the upper bound and just above the lower bound on the left over there. So To conclude, on this paper, we did some main contributions were a notion of information leakage on equities trading, which is not dependent on modeling price, which is good, because for finance specifically, modeling price models are very noisy and hard to work with. Defined an interactive game that's based on, inspired on the differential privacy notion of bounding this information leakage, and translated this one-round version into a linear optimization algorithm. It's also implemented in a freely available tool that was submitted as an artifact, and optimizing Alice's activity for varying assumptions of side information and impact on the market. So, some open questions that we are working on. What are the optimal solutions to the multi-round game? So this is a nice linear programming approach, but for the multi-round, depending on how you use it, it explodes. So we are trying to work around with that. So the general differential privacy problem of picking the epsilon and delta, what do they actually mean on this scenario? There is also the attack scenario for Eve. So how is Eve measuring these things? And what exactly can we, if you can understand how Eve measures this, she can make different time windows and also do different measures on the data set. And of course, when is Pets going to IPO and start trading on the stock market as well. Thank you very much. And also, just to mention, I would like to thank my co-authors, Ellison and Lisa, for their lovely slides. They did this for real-world crypto. Mine wouldn't be nearly as good as this one. So thank you very much.
Okay, we'll go over the far side first. And we'll take one from this side.
So you mentioned that it's difficult to choose the parameters in practice for the privacy bounds. I'm curious if, looking at the real data, if the bounds that keep the perturbed distribution inside the bounds are small enough to prevent any kind of knowledge from the attacker, or whether the attacker can still execute the adversarial trading strategy you discussed.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really looking too much into the parameters themselves, but we are now starting to look from Eve's perspective as well. So we hope, I mean, market data is very noisy, and the problem is that you can't really experiment with it very easily, right? You can just go and buy a lot of shares and see what happens. So we are experimenting, start working on the Eve side of approach as well, to try to understand how these parameters would interplay with, for example, some possible attacks that Eve can have. Thank you.
Hey, great talk. Do you think that this would hold for options as well as just shares? I know that the options market is a little bit more volatile, but do you think that kind of the same modeling would hold?
Oh, I'm really not sure. So my PhD was in the quantitative information flow bit, so I'm the information leakage more part of it. So I'm not really sure if it would hold. Sorry, I can check and get back to it.
Thank you.
Hi, so you would say you're modeling price, not modeling price, I'm assuming you're modeling like book pressure or something?
Yes, so this in the stock is pretty much the example of volume, right? So pretty much the amount of shares. But in the paper, you use volume pressure.
But I'm curious, like there are like companies like Citadel Securities that scan the order book data and look for more features than just simple book pressure. Is that something that you consider when for the adversary model, that they look for more details than just book pressure, and how would you deal with that?
Yeah, so for this specific scenario, we pretty much looked in volume pressure from Alice's perspective. We haven't really explored attacker models yet, but we haven't really gone into other quantities like that. But definitely for the adversary side, we are looking into more probably more dimensions on
And
sketching.
and
We're
oh, okay.
Oh, sure. Thanks, we can discuss. But thank
Can
you very
we
much.
thank the speaker once more?